Hey guys, John here. Today we're in the Arturia DX7, and in today's patch, we're going to be making a classic coursey pad that kind of almost turns a little brassy once we increase the mod wheel, so it kind of sounds like this with the mod wheel down. And then with our mod wheel kind of up here. All right, so let's get into making this patch here. So I have a fresh copy of the DX7 here, so let's go to File and then New Preset. So let's kind of open up the advanced sides for both of these. You can click on advanced or just the main header here. Either way, it kind of works. So the first thing that we need to talk about is what algorithm that we're going to be using, because that plays a huge portion on the sound. So for this, it's going to be algorithm 3, because we really want 2 modulators to affect the carrier, right? So this operator 3 is going to affect 2, and then 2 is going to affect 1, and then 1 is going to be the carrier or the operator that we hear. So with that being said, let's go to the first one here. And let's change this to the third algorithm. And for the first operator here, it's kind of fine. We're going to be 1 and no detuning, and that's kind of what we're doing here. Although the envelope is going to be a little bit different. We have a slope, kind of like a linear slope here, and then it goes straight for a while. And then we have kind of a concave release. So let's go ahead and remake that. Because right now we just have just kind of a boring sine wave. And that vibrato here is because of the mod wheel. Let's go ahead and turn that down, because that's going to be a little bit weird a little bit later on. So let's go ahead and bring that down here. Okay. Okay, so we have the sine wave. Okay, so let's do a little bit of linear here. It's kind of a little bit before 25, and then we're kind of just extending our release here and kind of giving it a nice little concave. And we can come back to the shape a little bit later if we want to. Okay, so now for the second operator, it's going to be 1 as well, but it's going to be detuned by 1.20, which you can do it here or on this front panel as well. So let's go ahead and add that here. So we can go 1.20. And then the volume is going to be at 71. So let's bring this up to 71. So we're going to get that tonality, but we do need to change this envelope because we don't want that tonality the whole time. So we're doing a little kind of a ramp in here, something a little bit like that. And then on this side, it kind of fades down pretty quick under 0.50. So let's go 0.50, and it kind of fades down like that. And then maybe a little bit extra for the release. And I think we can do a little concave or something like that. And there's a lot of that mud here. So on the first operator, let's go ahead and change this to a high pass and kind of just maybe bring this down to 300 or so. That should be fine. Okay, so now on the third one, so this is going to be 5. Let's bring this up to 5, and let's check out the envelope for this one here. So this guy is going to be kind of a steep fall off. The sustained is a little bit before 0.375. So 0.375 is kind of down here like that, and then we have just maybe a little bit of a release, something kind of like that, or a little bit longer one with a little concave. So it's going to bring this out and kind of drag this down like that. And we need to increase this volume as well, which we have at 54. See how that tonality kind of changes just a little bit there? So we have our core sound here. Now, what we need to do to add a little bit of coolness here to it is adding 2 voices of unison. As you see on this first one here, we have 2 voices, and we're kind of detuning this by 21.6. So let's go ahead and add the unison 2, and then kind of listen to how this changes. 21-ish or so. Now we can bring our volume up a little bit too. Maybe a little bit longer release could be kind of nice. Or attack and release. Okay, so now we need to get a little bit into the effects here. So for this effects, we're going to use a delay into an analog chorus, into a reverb, and then to a little bit of corrective EQ here. So let's go to our effects, and then let's add the delay, which is this guy. We need to sync it, and it's going to be by default 1/8, so that's fine. We do need to reduce the feedback because that's kind of a lot, and kind of bring down the dry wet knob. Okay, that should be fine. And then analog chorus, which is this guy here. And the 2 setting is fine. Just kind of bring down the dry wet just a little bit. It's a little bit loud. We can bring that back down here. Okay, so next up we have the reverb. So this one's always to taste. By default, this comes out super huge, which you could leave like that if you'd like to. I kind of reduced the room sizes a little bit and kind of brought down the dry wet a little bit like that. Which is probably okay for the most part. And the pre-delay is at 20 milliseconds, which is fine. And then the EQ here, so we can select, if yours looks like this, you can always select this button here. The graph is kind of a little bit easier to work with. So I pretty much took this all the way to the left and then brought this down and then kind of just right click and kind of moving up and down to increase the EQ there. Kind of just cleans it up a little bit. And this patch is kind of supposed to sound a little bit dark and kind of mystical, I guess, and kind of washed out a little bit. Okay, so now some of the important part to kind of turn this a little bit into brass. So we have to go into our mods. So if we click in here on the mods, these first 2 are going to be there by default, which we don't really need. So if we kind of like take a look at these here. So on our mod wheel, if we bring this up, I mean, it's kind of a cool effect, but we don't really need that. So we can double click these both to remove them. Now on the left-hand side, we need to use our mod wheel to kind of affect the brass kind of sound. So we can click this none here and then go to the mod wheel. And then on the top one, we need to select the first operator feedback. And that's going to be kind of that sound that we get, right? So on this one over here, I went about 0.584. And a good way to kind of find the max value is basically get your mod wheel and put it all the way up and then start kind of increasing this value. So click and drag until you find the maximum until it starts breaking. And that's kind of going to be the most that you want to do. So let's take a listen to that. So up here, it is pretty intense. A little bit too intense for my taste. So I kind of would like to bring it back just a little bit here. But yeah, that's kind of the basics of this patch here. Something to keep in mind, especially doing FM synthesis, is that these levels here are very crucial, and just a little bit moving these can really change the sound, especially also the detuning here that kind of just keeps things a little bit in motion, and the unison can come a long way as well. And it's a fun way to kind of approach synthesis, right? Because we're so used to adding saw waves and square waves and kind of subtracting from that, right? Using subtractive synthesis. This is a whole different animal, right? Where we're kind of combining different oscillator operators and kind of creating that timbre as well. And something to kind of maybe think about this to make it a little bit easier in your mind is that in this scenario here, we're using the third algorithm. And we're using 3, 2, and 1, and then 6, 5, and 4, right? So 1 and 4 being the ones that we would hear, and then 2, 3, and 5, and 6 are going to be the ones modulating the carrier, right? So if we think of it this way, that this 1, we can kind of think this as like an oscillator, right? And then 2 and 3 are going to be kind of creating that sound, right? So it's kind of using a stack and kind of just looking at the first one and changing the shapes and all that with 2 and 3. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. But yeah, kind of look at it as like you're creating a timbre, you're creating a texture as an oscillator, how we would use in any other synth, right? We just dial up a waveform. But here we're kind of creating that waveform by combining them and FMing them together. So yeah, that's kind of the way I think about it in my head. But if you'd like to get a copy of this patch, it's for free. There's a link in the video description below and it can be yours. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.